Lilith is a name known everywhere in the world. When discussing the so-called biblical Lilith, most people can tell you that she was the first wife of Adam. Rarely, however, do they know where this tale comes from. Nearly everybody knows that piece of the story, and those same people know that it's also not biblical. The story of Lilith is a fascinating one, and it spans much longer than one would think. From ancient Sumer to modern-day America, the Lilith story has evolved to the point where it's no longer recognizable. Today, I will be discussing the origins and evolution of the Lilith tale, from its simple beginnings to its esoteric present. This is Lilith in Myth and History. In today's world, Lilith is seen as the queen mother of demons, a baby killer, and a seductress of the night. Sometimes she can be seen as a powerful succubus. In fact, there's only one reference to the word Lilith in the entire Bible, Isaiah 34:14. And desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and goat demons will call out to each other. There also Liliths will settle, and find for themselves a resting place. There's a lot to unpack in this verse, but for our purposes, we will only be concentrating on the word Lilith. The translation of Lilith changes from version to version. Some translators use night creatures, others use night owl, and yet others use screech owl. There's a good reason for this variation, but we will return to this verse later. To understand the view of Lilith portrayed in Isaiah, we need to discuss the ideologies of the world leading up to this. Who was Lilith? Or, more appropriately, what were they? Integral to understanding this mindset, it is necessary to go back to the ancestral home of Lilith, so to speak. Long before the birth of Judaism, and even before the religion of the ancient Israelites, Lilith was already something to be feared in ancient Mesopotamia. This was nowhere near the form in which we know Lilith today. Lilith was not yet a baby-killing seductress. In the ancient world, prior to the 7th century BCE, Lilith appears in a number of texts, and we can get a glimpse of what Lilith was originally like. One of the earliest references to Lilith is in the story of Gilgamesh and the Hulupu tree. While the earliest extant narrative of this story comes from a later period, scholars have dated the origins of the story to around the same time as the rest of the Gilgamesh epic, perhaps from a separate tradition. This story seems like it's meant to be read after the conclusion of the Gilgamesh epic on Tablet 12. The story itself dates to around 2000 BCE. After creation, a Hulupu tree is found in the Euphrates and brought to the goddess Inanna. A snake, a Zobar, and Lilith are said to rest there. In its midst, Lilith, Lila, has built herself a home. Inanna, wanting to rid the tree of the invaders, calls upon the help of Gilgamesh, who is said to have destroyed the snake. Upon seeing this, the bird and Lilith flee. Lilith destroys her new home and escapes to Adi-Adies, desert places. From this text, we can surmise that the ancient notion of Lilith included her home being in the desert. To understand Lilith in the ancient world, it is necessary to know the differences in the usage of the word Lilith. In contrast to the modern perception of Lilith, which makes her out to be an evil woman, the ancient perception of Lilith was actually as a class of demons. Instead of the singular entity in today's lore, Lilith was more of a title for a set of demons. The Sumerian Lilin is the normal plural, the masculine plural being Lili, and the feminine singular being Lilith. In Akkadian, the same word is Lilu, with the feminine being Lilitu. Keep this in mind when various forms of this word appear. Knowing this, the reference in the Sumerian king's list to Gilgamesh's father being a Lilu demon makes more sense. The Lilu were a class of demons that consisted of both male and female demons. For this video, we will generally concentrate on the female Lilu demons, with only brief references to the male ones when needed. This class of demons is expanded upon in a vast set of Assyrian and Babylonian incantations. Keep in mind that the specific incantations are hard to date, but generally come from the same 400-year Old Babylonian period, lasting from 2000 to 1600 BCE. The classes of demons include the disembodied human soul, half-human and half-demon spirits, devils and fiends, which were seen as being just as powerful as the gods and rode on winds, and the Lilu, Lilitu, and Aradat Lili, which were chief among the demons. The Lilitu and Aradat Lili were just the feminine counterparts of the more general Lilu. In their ancient contexts, Lilu could easily be described as a kind of ghost. The female Lilin were seen as the ghosts of women who died in childbirth. For this reason, the main fear of the Lili and Ardat Lili was that they would bear devilish children called Alu with mortal men. To put this in context, one Ardat Lili was described as having no husband. She wanders, unable to rest until she is satisfied. This wandering place, being a precursor to the Lilith described in Isaiah, is the desert. One line describes Ardat Lili as being a phantom of the night that roams in the desert. To protect against these demons, the ancient Babylonians and Assyrians wrote incantations against them as wards and spells of banishment. For example, Akkadian text 406 is written against Ardat Lili. Text 90 is written against Lil, occupant of the steep. Lil by itself actually means wind. Recall how these demons were said to ride on the wind. The identification of this text being against a member of this demonic class is further strengthened by noting that the form used here, Lila, is the same form of Lilith used in the story of Gilgamesh and the Hulupu tree discussed earlier. Sadly, texts after these that describe Lilu demons would be lost to history until the 7th century BCE. One of these is a small inscription on a bronze statuette of the four-winged god Pazuzu, in which we are told that he is the son of Hanpu, king of Lilu demons. This identification of Hanpu as the king of Lilu demons actually contradicts some of the texts we cover later, which also give differing accounts of who is the king of the Lilu demons. While important for ancient demonology, and perhaps the subject of another video, it won't be the focus of the discussion here. Another more important text for understanding the history of Lilith are the Arslan Tash amulets. These small plaques were found in northern Syria and present an important step in the evolution of the Lilith myth. The authenticity of these tablets is still in debate, however, so keep that in mind during this discussion. For a paper supporting their authenticity, I have sourced Jacobus van Dyke's The Authenticity of the Arslan Tash Amulets. Following the scholarship of Frank Moore Cross and Richard Saley, these amulets date to the 7th century BCE, around the same time as the Pazuzu heads. Written in Phoenician script, the incantations refer to 3 categories of demons: Sassam the god, lamb stranglers, and divine flyers. For this study, we will only focus on the divine flyers. Consider the following line from one of the amulets. "O flyers, from the dark room pass away, now night demons." It's clear that the divine flyers can also be described as night demons. For our purposes, it is to be noted that the word Cross and Saley translate as night demons is actually Lilin. I find the use of the amulets to be an interesting step in the Lilith story as well. Throughout the inscription, evil beings are addressed, a command for them to stay away is made, and finally a deal or covenant with the gods is appealed to. Specifically, in lines 5 through 8, we read, "The house I enter, ye shall not enter, and the court I tread, ye shall not tread." This recalls the ancient Assyrian and Babylonian incantations that were discussed earlier. Both share the distinct features of calling upon certain gods, those gods being set against some greater evil, and a call upon a divine oath. This system of warding away demons persists to this day, but in a watered-down form in the mezuzah. These are hung up on doorposts as signals to all who enter, be it natural or supernatural, that the home is Jewish, and is therefore a reminder that the place is holy. Cross and Saley described these amulets as pagan prototypes of the mezuzah. After the 7th century BCE, the next reference to Lilith is the verse in Isaiah. This post-exilic addition to the text was written as an ex eventu prophecy against all nations, with its emphasis on Edom. For a fuller argument on the dating of this chapter, I suggest the section in Eerdman's commentary. Lilith shows up nowhere in any text until the Hellenistic period. During this period, the Greek mythological figure Lamia, who shared similar attributes to Lilith, was promptly associated with Lilith. It's unclear how far back this connection actually goes, but they are different enough to show that these two evolved separately until this point. The word Lamia was actually used to mean Lilith in Jerome's Latin Vulgate. This association would eventually lead to Lilith's depiction as the snake in the garden, but we'll get to that. For now, we should discuss the first reference to Lilith in this period. Turning to the 2nd century BCE to the 1st century CE, we find a reference to Lilith in the Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran, specifically from Cave 4. We find one explicit reference and another implicit reference in the form of an incantation for an exorcism. The first text to examine is 4Q 510 through 11. This is sometimes referred to as Songs of the Sage. In this text, God is called upon to terrify demons that are leading men astray. Specifically, the text identifies these culprits as destroying angels, spirits of the bastards, demons, Lilith, howlers, and desert dwellers. This song was a chant to protect from evil spirits. Although the Lilith here don't contain much description, their existence was ultimately detrimental to the well-being of the Sons of Light. The second Qumran text is 4Q 560. This was written as an exorcism spell that specifically targets midwives of all people. Although the text is broken in places, I will be following the translation and reconstruction of the text by Wise, Abegg, and Cook. The midwife, the punishment of those who bear children, any evil visitant or demon. I adjure you all who enter into the body, the male wasting demon and the female wasting demon. I adjure you by the name of the Lord, he who removes iniquity and transgression, O fever demon and chills demon and chest pain demon. You are forbidden to disturb by night using dreams or by day during sleep, O male shrine spirit and female shrine spirit. O you demons who breach walls. Wicked. Following this, in column 2, the text becomes even more fragmentary. But from this first column, there is a lot to be gathered about how demons were viewed in the eyes of at least one Jewish sect around the turn of the first millennium. The author of this incantation has not only associated midwives with evil visitants or demons, but also paints these kinds of demons as bringers of sickness. Even though not explicit, the subject this incantation is written against is most probably a Lilith demon. Childbirth and its attendant complications were the primary domain of Lilith demons. This was covered in our discussion of the Babylonian and Assyrian incantations, but it will also be expanded upon when we discuss the Aramaic incantation bowls. The concept of a midwife as evil stems from the belief that demons could appear as midwives and cause illness to fall upon the mother or the child. Lilith was believed to enter the room of pregnant women in many forms and is adjured from doing so in numerous incantations. The influence of the Greek Lamia rears its head in this period, with a much wider range of evil being associated to the ancient concept of Lilu demons. Not too long after this, we see a full merging of what I presume is the class of demons known as Liliths and the Greek woman Lamia. Not much is known about the influence of Lamia and Lilith on each other, so I could very well be wrong. I'm just going off the evidence I have been presented and trying to put it all together into a working model. Seemingly, the most important attributes of each are combined into one. This comes from the Testament of Solomon. The date of composition is still highly debated, but it's generally seen as being written during the 3rd century CE. Keep that in mind when we discuss the text itself. In this apocryphal text, Solomon is shown to have complete control over demons. One of the demons he runs into is a female demon named Obazuth. She's described as having messy hair, invisible limbs, and a body covered in darkness. She describes her attributes, demonic duties, and goals to Solomon. Here, we are told that she does not sleep at night. She visits women in childbirth and strangles the child if she's lucky. She roams everywhere, travels along the wind, and can only rest after she has killed. She says that her only goal is to destroy children. She will strike them with blindness, deafness, muteness, mental health problems, and hurt their bodies. When asked why she was so frustrated, she said she was angry at the angel Epharot, who was identified as Raphael. Obazuth claimed that, "If any man know it, and write the name on a woman in childbirth, then I shall not be able to enter her." As to how prominent this tradition was, I do not know. But it's clear that the demon referred to in the Testament of Solomon is to be identified with Lilith, since they share the same features. What struck me the most is the description that she rode the wind, the same way the ancient Lilu demons did. It remains unclear, however, why the name Obazuth was used instead of Lilith. If the demoness was not supposed to be Lilith, but another demon, she shares an uncanny resemblance. The description of Lilith and her interaction with humans is expanded upon in the Babylonian Talmud. The text was written in the early 6th century, but was later expanded upon for the next 2 centuries. We are told that one may not sleep in a house alone, and whoever sleeps in a house alone is seized by Lilith. From one Talmudic author, in the book Eerdman, we learn of 10 curses put on Eve. All of these have to do with marriage, motherhood, and womanhood. Of these, Eve is not allowed to marry 2 men. If she did, she was said to grow long hair like Lilith. Another Talmudic author, in the book Niddah, reports that Rabbi Judah, citing Samuel, ruled, "If an abortion had the likeness of Lilith, its mother is unclean by reason of the birth, for it is a child, but it has wings." So it was also taught. Rabbi Jose stated, "It once happened at Simony that a woman aborted the likeness of Lilith, and when the case came up for a decision before the sages, they ruled that it was a child, but it also had wings." What does this all mean? Did they literally believe children were born with wings? I don't think so. From what I can tell, the ancient Lilu demons of old had morphed from desert-dwelling night demons that haunted men to mean, more or less, bad woman, at least to the Talmudic authors. Now, Lilith could be seen as the platonic form of a bad woman. The messy hair is probably a reference to being disheveled, untidy, and promiscuous. The wings are probably a metaphor for adultery in general. The child with wings would be one born out of wedlock or from an adulterous woman. The men, being seized by Lilith, might be a reference to nightly emissions, to put it lightly. Although that one is less clear, it would fit with the perception of Ardat Lili of ancient Mesopotamia discussed earlier. This view of Lilith would be depicted in the art and incantations of the era as well. A set of Aramaic incantation bowls from Nippur were uncovered and shed light on the image of Lilith and the threat this night demon posed. The bowls, dating to the early 7th century CE, describe and depict Lilith and her evil ways. I will not discuss every bowl, as there are many, but I will talk about Lilith as depicted on some of them. Bowls were often placed in each corner of a room, and they were inscribed with spells to ward away the demons. Interestingly, these bowls included spells created by Joshua ben Perahia, who often used the word getz. This was a document of divorce. The spells were, in some sense, literally telling these demons that they were getting a divorce. Bowl 1 talks about Lilith's haunting people in dreams and visions. Echoing the ancient perception of Lilu demons, this bowl also describes Lilith's coming in the form of the opposite gender. Bowl 6 references the male and female Liliths as well, and both are fond of killing children. Bowls 7, 8, 9, and 19 contain spells urging these demons to stay out of the bedrooms. This played on the fears about Lilith demons and expanded upon the long tradition of incantations that keep them away. Bowl 11 says that they strike both boys and girls, and it even describes a family of Liliths. They each have their own names with a lineage. Bowl 18 details their desire to destroy, kill, tear, strangle, and eat children. There's a strange divide between the singular female Lilith and the Lilu class of demons around this time, it seems. In one sense, Lilith was the evil woman that personified all evil women. In another sense, Lilith hadn't changed much since Mesopotamia. While these two concepts aren't mutually exclusive, it seems the transition was slow. Perhaps these developed through separate traditions. This curiosity is further complicated through a story about Elijah the prophet meeting Lilith, which is described on one of the incantation bowls. In the story, Elijah is walking down the road and runs into Lilith and all her band. Elijah questions her on where they're going, and Lilith says that she is on her way to the house of a woman in childbirth, to give her the sleep of death and to take her child which is being born to her, to suck her blood and to suck the marrow of its bones, to seal its flesh. Upon hearing this, Elijah ensnares her by speaking the name of God. She begs for her freedom and promised to no longer seek out this mother and her child. She tells him that if she sees her names, she is said to have multiple, she and her band will have no power to do evil. The idea of divine names has permeated nearly every text that wants to ward demons away or overcome them in some way. The idea in this Elijah story is somewhat different to how divine beings are invoked in other texts of the same nature. Usually, the names are meant to invoke a deity or angel to protect them. In this text, it seems the names that ward Lilith away are her own, and not a god or holy being. Perhaps this stems from the ancient Egyptian belief that knowing someone's true name suggests power over them. Although it is unusual, the text actually includes multiple names at the very beginning as an invocation, most likely. 3 of these names are Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangalof. These names are transliterated in many ways, but keep them in mind. The next time they appear is actually in another text that discusses Lilith, the Alphabet of Ben Sira. This is actually the earliest text that contains the story of who the evil Lilith, now completely a singular woman, is and what her origins are, as well as why she is so evil. The text itself, although dating slightly later than the Aramaic incantation bowls, most probably from the 8th through 10th centuries BCE, comes from the same Geonic period. So it's no surprise how similar the texts are in the unique listing of Lilith along with the 3 names just discussed. According to Stern and Mirsky, the text was probably written in a Muslim country and may be the earliest parody in Jewish literature. Throughout its history, the perception of this book has quite a range. At one extreme, it was seen as a source of halakha, law, and on the other hand, it was seen as the vilest form of blasphemy there could be. There are many reasons this book could be seen as a problem, and I plan to talk about this book more in depth in later videos. For now, it's just important to note that this text contains 22 aphorisms, one for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The person speaking these is the legendary Jesus ben Sirach, otherwise known simply by Ben Sira. He is the author of the highly influential Book of Ben Sirach, which was written in the early 2nd century BCE. The alphabet of Ben Sira wasn't written by Ben Sira though, it was simply ascribed to him. After the aphorisms, there is another set of 22 episodes. These are questions posed to Ben Sira by the king Nebuchadnezzar. Ben Sira responds to each of these with a story. In one case, Nebuchadnezzar's son had fallen ill, and the king asked Ben Sira for his help. Ben Sira gives the child an amulet. This amulet contained the 3 names Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangalof. These same names occur on the incantation bowl discussed previously, preceding the Elijah story. Nebuchadnezzar inquires as to what the names mean, and Ben Sira responds and informs him that these are the angels of medicine. He then continues to tell the story of Adam and his first wife, Lilith. In the beginning, there was only Adam. God created for him a woman named Lilith. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight. She said to Adam, "I will not lie below." Adam responded, "I will not lie beneath you, but only on top. For you are fit only to be in the bottom position, while I am to be in the superior one." Their argument went nowhere, and Lilith flew away. Adam prayed, and God sent those 3 angels, Senoi, Sansenoi, and Samangalof, to bring her back. An ultimatum was given, which said if Lilith returned, all would be well. If not, she would allow 100 of her children to die every day. The angels caught up to her and met her at the Red Sea. Upon hearing the ultimatum God had set forth, she still did not wish to return. The angels then threatened to drown her. She asked them to leave and claimed that she was only created to cause sickness to infants. The angels again attempted to persuade her to come back, but she still refused. She said that if she saw the names of the angels written on a child's amulet, she would be forced to leave, and the child would be healthy. The angels left without her, and 100 demons die every day. It is because of this that the names of these angels are to be written on amulets. The idea of a first wife of Adam probably arose as a solution to a discrepancy in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. In Genesis 1:27, we are told that God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. This sounds like both male and female were created simultaneously. In Genesis 2:22, we are told that God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. This passage shows that God created the woman after the man. So which one is it? Were they created at the same time or at separate times? Modern scholars generally agree that these 2 passages are from 2 different authors, so there is no actual problem, at least from a text-critical standpoint. but it seems that the author of the Alphabet of Ben Sira, and presumably some rabbis, reasoned that the first passage is referring to a different woman, a first woman that wasn't Eve. While many scholars today see the Alphabet of Ben Sira as an ancient Jewish parody, the Lilith story found within still permeates our culture. The three angels that are to be listed on amulets occur both in the alphabet and in serious incantations, so it is no surprise that we find these names written somewhere during the birth of a Jewish child. There was a multitude of spells and rituals that were associated with labor in medieval Jewish homes. Psalms could be chanted, scrolls could be placed on the bed or brought to the door, candles could be lit, the woman could wear an article of her husband's clothing. But aside from these, and many more, one of the most popular birthing rituals included protecting the mother and the child from Lilith. The names of the three angels were written on amulets, recalling the alphabet's account. The ritual of writing the angels' names on birthing amulets preceded the story, of course, but it's unclear where it began. Perhaps it found its origin in the Geonic period. The tradition was at least upheld until the 11th century, when the Kabbalistic Book of Raziel was written, where multiple copies of these birthing amulets appear, all containing the names of the three angels of medicine. This custom continued even to the 17th century. Leone Modena, a 17th century chief rabbi of Venice, recorded the use of the birthing amulets in the city. Most of it we are already familiar with. The paper amulet was written to protect from Lilith, and on it were the names of the three angels of medicine. One thing that struck me about his description was that the amulets were apparently placed in all four corners of the room as well, echoing the way many of the Aramaic incantation bowls were found. It may also interest you to know that sometimes, during birth, a circle would be drawn around the bed to protect from Lilith. This was on top of the use of the amulets. Another important Lilith myth comes from the Midrash Abkir, which is dated to the 10th century. This is a commentary on Genesis and Exodus, and is only preserved in the writings of others. To my knowledge, no English translation of all the fragments exists, so I will quote Raphael Patai, who, in his book The Hebrew Goddess, recounts this tale. Other sources of this story seem to all be quoting Patai, usually using his words verbatim, but not actually citing him. Because I could not find any English translation of the story Patai tells, I couldn't verify it, so please take this with a grain of salt, unless you can read Hebrew. According to Patai, Adam, we learn, was a perfect saint, and when he understood that because of his sin, or as a consequence of Cain's fratricide, death came into the world, he separated from Eve, slept alone, and fasted for 130 years. But Lilith, whose name is Pisna, found him, desired his beauty, which was like that of the sun disk, and lay with him. The issue of these unions were demons and spirits called the plagues of mankind, who lurk under doorways, in wells, and in latrines, and lead men astray. The idea that Adam and Lilith parented Lilin and evil spirits became a mainstay in many mystical writings of Kabbalah. Kabbalah is, in fact, the next phase in the evolution of the Lilith myth. The main text in Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, is the Zohar. It was written after the Kabbalah had originated, so we will discuss texts in the Zohar afterwards. The origins of Kabbalah are for a different video altogether, but for right now, we need to take a look at the writings of the 13th century Kabbalist Isaac Cohen of Soria. There was already a vast body of literature and rabbinical writings on the topics of demons and demonology, but Cohen greatly expanded on the mythos. He claimed to be using the ancient texts, the Lesser Hekaloth and the Sefer Malbush, but whatever copies he used must not have any relation to the texts of those names we know today. Isaac Cohen, in his Treatise on Left Emanation, describes the myth of Lilith and Samael. This was a reworking of the more natural history of the Alphabet of Ben Sira to a more divine history. He told the story of Lilith and Samael. Samael was originally a fallen angel in the Book of Enoch. He was also described in some 2nd century Gnostic texts as Blind God, God of the Blind, or the Blind Archon. Eventually, he was promoted in later rabbinic literature to the archangel in charge of Rome. According to Cohen, Samael and Lilith were created as one, a hermaphroditic being. In this tradition of thought, Adam and Eve were created similarly, so Cohen was creating a divine parallelism. Lilith was never the first wife of Adam, as it was previously. According to Cohen, she was always the wife of Samael. Together they ruled the world of darkness and satanic power. Samael who was already seen as Satan, was now given a wife that personified vice and sexuality. The Kabbalistic view of Lilith didn't end there. Seemingly, there was a huge divergence in tradition in the 13th century. Rabbis seemed to create a new version of Lilith every time they wrote of her. For the sake of brevity, I will only cover a few readings from the Zohar, the major work of the Kabbalah. There are diverging narratives about the birth, life, and death of Lilith that arise around this time, so it would be unreasonable for me to cover all of them here. My sources are in the description, so follow up on those to learn more. The last large-scale development in the Lilith mythology comes from the esoteric Zohar. This text was, for a long time, believed to be the work of the Talmudic authors. However, most scholars today accept that it was written in the 13th century by Moses de Leon. Discussing this would diverge from the point, so I will leave that for another time. According to the Zohar, Lilith makes darkness and it is night. She also is said to be equal in power to the angels. This would make sense if she was created in the same form as Samael, who was viewed as a powerful angel. Here too, we see the myth of the hermaphroditic Adam, but this time we are told that in a very ancient occult book, we have found it stated that what God took from the side of Adam was not a rib, but Lilith, who had cohabitated with him and given birth to offspring. She was, however, an unsuitable helpmeet for Adam. As one can see, the Lilith legend has many narratives of her birth and relationship to Adam, which were diverging even more greatly in the 13th century. After their divorce, so to speak, they descended to Earth, meaning that in this interpretation, they had existed celestially until then. The Lilith myth has developed quite a lot during the past 4 millennia. From a class of Mesopotamian night demons that rode the wind, to an evil visitant during childbirth causing complications with birth, to a baby-killing seductress of men and mother of demons, to the first wife of Adam, to a feared queen of darkness, Lilith is still warded against by some. Developing from the ancient Lilith demons, it only makes sense that this myth would develop into the very idea of a bad woman. Building on the back of this and the identification with the Greek Lamia, Lilith would come to be depicted in art as the snake in the garden. As Rebecca Lessis notes about the Aramaic incantation bowls, as specifically female demons, the Liliths are the antitype of the proper woman, both in ancient and rabbinic sources and in the incantation bowls. Instead of marrying and forming a household with her husband, giving birth to children, nourishing and raising them, the Lilith pursues whomever she wishes, comes between husband and wife, and kills children. She is an anarchic figure in the realms of sexuality and reproduction, and presents a nightmare image of a woman who is not constrained by law, convention, or sanity. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, be sure to like and subscribe. If you enjoy our content and want to help support this channel, check out our Patreon and Teespring links in the description. If you don't want to spend money, but still see what we're doing outside of YouTube, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Also, make sure to check out our website, MilwaukeeAtheists.com. We'll see you next time.